Okay.
Yep, looks great. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So hi, everybody. My name is Christy Reyes. I'm located in North San Diego County. I've been teaching throughout San Diego for more than 23 years as an ESL instructor in many different types of programs. And I'm really excited to introduce, actually, I'll let them introduce themselves, our two other speakers today.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Happy Monday. I'm Jill Ibbotson. I am an adult ed ESL faculty coordinator at Saddleback College and co-department chair. I have been working in citizenship and facilitating ESL for approximately the last 23 years. Prior to working at Saddleback, I worked for Capistrano Unified School District in the adult ed program, which became part of Saddleback College back in 2015. And I was selected as one of 4 California educators this year to participate in the TSTM project, which you're going to hear a lot more about today.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Jody Williams, and I am the lead adult education instructor and citizenship ESL instructor for BPSOS Center for Community Advancement in Westminster, California in Orange County. I've been working in adult education in various roles since March 2016. And I, along with Jill, was selected as part of the California team for the TSTM project. Thank you, everyone, for attending.
So this is our agenda for today. We're going to start with some warm-up questions. We're going to look at a definition of civics education, talk about why it's important, especially for our adult learners. And we'll be talking about this TSTM, in which there are 9 skills. So we'll be going over the skills that apply directly to civics education. And we will also talk about some best practices for teaching civics. Jody and Jill are going to speak about some lesson plans from this TSTM toolkit that you were going to be learning about. And then we'll have some question Q&A time and wrap up. So we want to ask you, with this poll that you see pop up in front of you, how often do you currently include civics in your curriculum? How often do you teach civics? Never, sometimes, often. Okay, it looks like you're in the right place because no one is saying never. So we'll give you just about a couple more seconds to answer the poll question. Okay, it looks like everybody but a couple have not voted. One more person, you want to vote? Okay, so we'll go ahead and end the polling now. And it looks like sometimes or often. So you're in the right place, as I said, to just get a little more information, and especially about this toolkit that we've been talking about and how you can potentially use it and learn more about other things you could be teaching. So if you are currently teaching civics topics, I mean, not necessarily right at this week, but if you've been doing this for a while, what kind of topics are you covering? If you can type that in the chat. What sort of, I see that there were some citizenship teachers, so that's an obvious lesson topic, preparing students for their citizenship interview. Okay, citizenship, great, thank you, Susan. Employment soft skills, internet safety and housing, great, job skills. Okay, Jane administers the practice citizenship test. Health, nutrition, communicating with skills, digital literacy, citizenship, internet, social studies, nutrition, education, work, government, political participation, great. And useful community organization, citizenship and life skills. Wow, it sounds like you're doing a lot of great things already. I love these topics, DMV, everything here. I imagine a lot of you perhaps have it, your agency EL Civics. So that's a natural thing to be including if you do have that as part of your curriculum. So thank you for sharing. This is the definition from a National American Institutes for Research project for civics education. They define civics education as instruction that enables adults to achieve competency in the English language and acquire the basic and more advanced skills needed to function effectively as parents, workers, and citizens in the United States. So we've got the literacy, the English language kind of combined there, while we're teaching about rights and responsibilities of citizenship, civic participation, and like a lot of you said, workplace preparation as part of that as well. So we'd like to ask you to share in the chat your opinion. Why do you think civics education is important, especially in our adult teaching arena? If you want to take a moment to share in the chat. I love that. Knowledge is power. Yes, very practical. Empowers students to live fuller lives, gives them the life skills that they need, opens new opportunities. It helps them become full members of society. That's excellent. Thank you. Increase the quality of their lives. It's the application. Exactly. If you're teaching language or you're teaching social studies, how are they going to apply that knowledge outside of the classroom? That's excellent. Help them blend, help them get life skills. Thank you. Those are excellent. I love all of your answers. Thank you, everyone. So yeah, you're all right. Students can advocate for themselves, for others, be involved in their community. Getting digital literacy is a valuable and probably very essential thing to be doing today. It helps them become lifelong learners and be productive members of society. Well, I guess I don't need to tell you, you all came up with many excellent reasons why teaching civics to our students, our adult students, is so important. Thank you. What I'd like to do next is to tell you a little bit about the skills. The Teaching the Skills That Matter in Adult Education project, often referred to as TSTM, trains teachers to integrate the skills that matter to adult students using approaches that work across 5 topic areas, and civics is one of those 5 areas. We're going to go over the skills that matter. There are 9 of them, and you're going to recognize them as the transferable or soft skills, you know, the skills that people need in every area of their life to do all the things that you mentioned, like be involved in their community and advocate for themselves and everything like that. So we're going to go over the skills that are necessary to develop in students when we're teaching civics lessons. And you know, obviously, when we teach these skills, it will help them become better and more active participants in their communities. And we'll talk about some instruction activities we can plan along with these skills to help students further develop these skills. So there are 9 skills, and the first is critical thinking. As you can see the definition there, when students are getting some information, they can weigh the pros and cons or the arguments of all sides and then make an informed decision or come to a conclusion. So what could we do in the classroom to help students develop critical thinking in terms of civics lessons? We can have learners create and conduct a survey. They can survey their classmates on their civic engagement. They could ask their classmates about attendance at city council or school board or other government meetings. They could survey maybe even others outside of their class about their participation in voting, volunteerism, and engagement with community organizations. We could assign groups to analyze that data that students collect from their surveys around these different issues, have them create graphs, present their findings, summarize engagement levels of the people they spoke to. The next skill that we see there is communication. And obviously, if we're teaching language, we're teaching communication. But for native speakers of English, this means that our students will be able to effectively share and understand with each other information that they are sharing. So how could we develop students' communication skills? In class, we could have students observe video clips of interaction with community members, different community members. It could be 2 people interacting as neighbors, or a parent interacting with a school teacher, someone in law enforcement. If you teach citizenship, maybe you could find some video clips of an INS official at a naturalization interview. And what we could have students do as they're observing these videos is note the differences in the forms of address, ways of responding to questions, and overall level of formality. Our instruction would focus on the specific language, in this case, what we call register, the level of formality, used in varying contexts. I think that would be really important for all of our students to have an activity like that. The next skill that we have of the 9 skills and how we could further students' development of these skills in the class in civics is processing and analyzing information. So this is when students are getting some information that they're able to consider facts, opinions, and potential outcomes, and then make informed decisions about their own life and their community. What can we do in our class? We can assign learners to explore a current issue of concern in their community by conducting case studies. This really gets them to college and career readiness as well. So an example would be for students to conduct a case study about increases in ICE rates of local businesses, or they could do a case study about how recent changes in DACA legislation may affect families. Students can research legislation and current practices and propose action steps for those involved. So that's really mimicking in the classroom what we would hope students would do outside of the classroom. The next skill is processing and analyzing information. Oops, sorry, I think I skipped one. Processing and analyzing information. So this is, no, I actually did that one. Next, self-awareness. So self-awareness is pretty self-explanatory, but this is when students can have a real grasp and understanding of their impact on others, and they can realize what maybe cultural biases they have or personal biases they have. So in the classroom, we could have students engage in a mock democratic process. I don't know if you ever have students vote for certain things in the class. Giving student choice is a best practice. So we could give students an issue affecting the classroom. Maybe we could have students vote about the type of feedback they would like to receive on their writing, if you teach writing. Then students could vote by secret ballot, and the results could be counted, and we can really model and demonstrate the idea of majority rule. We could end the lesson by having students reflect on the impact of their voter participation and how this extends to their rights and responsibilities as voters. I think you can see all these lesson ideas really are the application, as one of you said, of all of our lessons, what we expect students to do outside of the class. So then we come to problem solving. You know what problem solving is, but this is when we have students practice addressing issues that may arise in their everyday lives, both as well as issues that may be happening in their communities. So a lesson that could help students boost their problem solving skills would be a lesson in which we have students brainstorm a list of issues of concern and then select one of those issues for research. So maybe you would have different groups, small groups in the class, conducting research about different issues of concern. I think a common issue of concern for many people in California is the homelessness problem that we have. So if that is a certain issue in your community, maybe students would select to do some research about that, and they could learn about the factors affecting homelessness, such as jobs, availability of jobs, average pay for people who may be living on the streets and have limited education, cost of housing in their area. This is a huge issue, of course, in California, the cost of housing. And maybe they could also do some research about the availability of homeless shelters. This could lead to actions, we would hope, such as volunteering at a homeless shelter or collecting used clothing for homeless families. We have a couple more skills to go. The next one is navigating systems. So this is a skill in which our adult students know and understand and are able to use their voice and have their voices heard. This is, of course, evident in voting, but also for some of our students, even just knowing how to register to vote and the process or steps you go through to become a citizen. A really good fit with navigating systems is using project-based learning. We could assign teams of students to investigate services in the community based on their personal needs. Some examples for some of our students, especially highly educated professional immigrants, would be learning about re-credentialing supports. For other students, maybe it'd be voter registration, food banks, other forms of public assistance, tenants' rights organizations, or we know this is a barrier for many of our adult students, affordable childcare. Together, as a project, teams can create posters or take part in a gallery walk, share what they found, and learn about all of these different services from one another. I love that idea. And next we have adaptability and willingness to learn. Well, hopefully our adult students already are highly skilled in this area because they are taking our classes and are intrinsically motivated. But how this plays out in everyday life is when our adult students seek new ways to improve their situation as well as the situation of others. And they recognize that there is room for growth. There are ways that they can better themselves and their lives. So to exercise this skill in our classroom, we could have students read about the positive impacts of community involvement. They could create a self-assessment to determine the likelihood that they would engage in various practices. They would then identify actions they are willing to take to increase their involvement in the community. So we can't force students to be involved in their communities, but I think giving them opportunities to learn, that might just spur on their motivation a bit too. And the last of the 9 skills is respecting differences in diversity and interpersonal relations. So important, really. So this helps our students understand how they can interact with different groups outside of their usual group, and while they still maintain their own identity and their own traditions. As you can see from this quote, adult education programs are often a microcosm of the broader community and the lack of understanding that can exist between and among groups. We know that this happens in many neighborhoods throughout California where there are maybe groups of immigrants or groups of certain racial backgrounds that live together and don't interact. But having those interactions and having that happen in our classrooms can break down some barriers. So what we could do for this last skill is plan a class project again and have that revolve around all players in an adult educational setting to provide vehicles for building cross-cultural understanding. So working with learners across the program, students process scenarios related to the cultural groups represented at their adult education agency. They could evaluate multiple perspectives on one event, such as differing values and beliefs around issues, varying forms of address, differing ways of participating in teams or with classmates, and various forms of physical contact or gestures. I don't know if you know the data, they say that 1 in 4 people in California are foreign born, were born outside of the United States. So we need to help in our classrooms build those bridges for students. So there are a few best practices for adult education in terms of teaching civics. And so I want to go over those again. I will mention that these are from the Teaching the Skills That Matter federal initiative. And you can find more information about this. Some links will be shared in the chat, and they're on the links website as well. Okay. So the first best practice is to consider learners' personal circumstances. So as you know, each learner has unique circumstances. They come to us with different needs, different issues, And for our learners to become participatory or justice-oriented citizens, we need to situate our instruction using opportunities for engagement in their own communities. So we can establish their personal goals, find out why they're taking our classes, what they plan to do with their increased skills, their motivations. And we should also find out their comfort levels in becoming involved in a community problem or issue they are facing. We have to get their buy-in, and we have to create a genuine need to engage students with the topics. So a lot of times this may require us to do some differentiating. What that means is having different groups work on different projects of interest for them in the class. So we could spend time all together with our students generating ideas and finding out about our students' prior knowledge of the topics that we brainstorm together. Second is support language development. So civics topics can provide engaging content for language development. When we use authentic current reading and listening materials, we can have students work on using those materials strategies for accessing complex texts, which we know is part of the college and career readiness standards. So not just fiction, but reading watching informational videos on community organizations, looking at infographics, tables, charts, all of these things that we do ourselves outside of our working day. All of these types of materials provide real world data on anything from school choice to crime rates. So we also need to ensure that we provide the academic language frames needed to engage in deep, sustained discussions. So not only for our second language learners, our non-native speakers, but even for some of our students who may be missing some of that academic language or the polite forms. So giving frames for expressing opinions. So helping students understand that they could say, as far as I'm concerned, or a frame for agreeing. That's an excellent point. Or for elaborating on others' ideas. So the sentence frame of, I see your point, and I would like to add that. And the last best practice, as you can see here, is provide community. This is not the last practice, sorry. The third practice that you see here is, you can see it has to do with working on multiple literacies. Traditionally, when we think of literacy, we think of reading and writing, but there are something like 13 different literacies these days. So the next best practice is for instruction that has students working on these multiple literacies. Often civics related content is again presented with infographics. That's a common way for us to get data these days. But there could also be charts and graphs and current information that's online for students to study. As we gather or create our lesson materials, we really should try to integrate varying forms of text, both print and digital. I'm sure you're doing that these days now that we're teaching remotely, a lot of us. Students can be assigned to gather current information from different government websites. They could be sent to the US Census Bureau to find some of the information from the latest census, which just happened last year, or the Pew Research Center. This kind of activity is really getting them prepared for all the other types of tasks and things that they will do college, career, and their everyday lives as well. And now is the best practice number 4, the last one. Provide community engagement opportunities. So it's wonderful and great if we're teaching civics and we're helping our students understanding how they can advocate for themselves and be politically involved in all of that. But we need to maybe go one step further. So having activities that support this best practice include having guest speakers. They could come to your class. You could do this even if you are teaching remotely, right? Going on class field trips once this is, once we can, and attending events as a class, attending, for example, a school board meeting. I wonder how many of our students have ever attended one. I know I haven't even attended a school board meeting before. And assigning out of class tasks, such as individual field trips that require students to go visit a museum or a government office or something like that, and gather information and then report back to the class. So those hopefully give you lots of different ideas for things that you can do for civics education, the skills and best practices. And I'm going to be turning it over to Jill in just a moment. And I will just say that the lessons that you're going to hear about from Jill and Jody are part of the toolkit of this federal initiative that I'll repeat again is called the Teaching the Skills That Matter. And the link will be shared with you in the chat. And it's a wonderful toolkit of civics and other types of adult educational lessons. So I'll now turn it over to Jill. Jill, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, we're really excited for you all to be learning about TSTM because you're going to be hearing more about it going forward as it's going to be rolled out through the state. So you guys are kind of getting like a first glimpse at it. So it's kind of exciting. As I mentioned, Saddleback College Adult Ed program came to be in 2015. We have programs which include adult ESL, high school equivalency, and adults with disabilities. And all three of those areas are funded by CAPE, and we also are funded by WIOA Title II. We have roughly 1,500 to 2,000 students per year, the largest of that being ESL, of course. The top languages that we serve are Spanish, Farsi, and Mandarin Chinese in that order. Our AESL classes range from basic literacy level all the way through advanced, as well as citizenship, which is the course that I teach. We also have classes, ESL for the workplace, which is a 2-course sequence. We have a level 1 and level 2 for a CDCP certificate. We also have basic computer skills courses that are going to be starting in the fall. That's also going to be a 2-course sequence for a CDCP certificate. And we have recently written vocabulary courses that we'll be starting to teach in the spring of next year. And that also will be, students will be able to earn a CDCP certificate if they complete a 2-course sequence in the vocabulary courses. Let's see, so HSE prep, we prepare students both in English and Spanish. And we actually just starting last Friday, we went back on campus. We offer the test at Saddleback College the first Friday of every month. So students can sign up and take the test with us in person. Oh, CDCP certificate. I see Jane is asking, it's college, it's career development and college prep. And then finally, our AWD courses, that's adults with disabilities. And we use the acronym OASIS, which is Occupational and Academic Skills for Independence and Success. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so the lesson that I chose from the toolkit is community involvement as social change. And it's part of the TSTM toolkit in the civics education tab. It is an integrated and contextualized lesson. The objectives for the lesson are to identify actions and strategies that can lead to social change, analyze how community action can lead to cohesion in a community, explain how sharing stories about community action may counter intolerance and build cross-cultural understanding, speak about social change, and listen for specific information and listen for attitudes through guided listening tasks. The central skills that were present during the lesson include communication, critical thinking, interpersonal skills, processing and analyzing information, and self-awareness. By engaging in discussion on the theme of community participation, students were able to think critically about different ways that they could become more involved and make this country their own. Next slide, please. Okay, so how did I adapt the lesson? So before we got started, I framed the lesson and I related it to citizenship. And you're going to hear the same from Jody, that our students are so laser focused on passing their USCIS interview and getting their naturalization that sometimes it's kind of a tough sell to teach them sort of anything that's outside of that little box of what they're expecting to learn in the class. So I did this by, I started off by reading a letter that a student, actually a friend of mine, had received when she got her naturalization. And so when they go to the ceremony, they receive a letter from the White House. This one was actually written by Barack Obama. And in the letter, it encourages new citizens to immerse themselves in the US and make the country their own. So next we moved on to vocabulary development, focusing on stress patterns and multi-syllable words relating to the topic. You can see a lot of those vocabulary words in that social change wheel there. And the change wheel was used to identify opportunities using the newly acquired vocabulary. Then I showed a PowerPoint, which we titled Together in Class, showing community members engaging in painting over graffiti, beach cleanup, food donation, Meals on Wheels, things like that. And so they were able to, articulate what they saw in the pictures and talk about, if they'd seen this type of activity happening in their communities or not, and whether or not they've, personally taken part in those types of activities. I then showed an excerpt of John F. Kennedy's inaugural speech, which we focused on the quote, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. Since that was actually in the introduction to the video that we watched later in the lesson, the video was actually a news segment and the reporter quotes that. So I wanted to frame that because I had a feeling most of them probably had never heard that quote yet. So we looked at that. Then we watched the video of Hamid, who is a Pakistani immigrant and new US citizen who lives in Pennsylvania. He owns a Dairy Queen and has participated in over 100 fundraisers to help members of his community. Lastly, we read through the discussion questions and then we rewatched the video using focused listening. The students were then placed in breakout rooms in Zoom, where I used the broadcast feature to pose the questions, followed by a whole class summary discussion. The homework assignment was a discussion post on what students can and are doing in their communities. I feel that all 4 of the best practices were present in the lesson. Students were able to consider their own personal circumstances regarding community involvement. Language development was supported through the use of authentic videos. Multiple literacy opportunities were present with the use of infographics like the social change wheel and varying forms of text. Community engagement opportunities were present as students participated in discussion posts and breakout rooms where they were able to articulate their present or future plans for engagement in the community. Next slide, please. Okay, so the lesson reflection. So as a result of the lesson, what could the students do? So they can identify ways to make their communities better. They can gather, understand, and share information about what their classmates do in their communities. They can think and talk about how community actions make the community better and bring people together. They can explain how sharing stories about community actions can build cross-cultural understanding. And they can speak about social change using academic vocabulary. So the students were very motivated by Hamid's story. They agreed that they too were the lucky ones to be living in the US with all that the country has to offer them. A few of the students actually shared ways that they have gotten involved in the community, including church groups, Knights of Columbus, volunteering at their children's school, or just simply taking time to listen to someone. So I think one of the main key takeaways for my students was that you don't have to have a lot of money. It doesn't always have to be something, that you have to be rich in order to do this, but you can just even volunteer your time and just talk to someone like at a senior citizens home or something like that. So now I'd like to share with you some resources. If you could change there, thank you. We all know that there's millions of resources out there, but I just wanted to share a couple of them with you that I use a lot. And you'll also see the link there for the TSTM virtual conference that's happening in June. And there, oh, thank you, Vicki. Vicki just put that link in the chat. There's also a link to the video that I showed in my class of Hamid. So you can feel free to take a look at that and use it in your class if you choose to. And then the other 2 resources, the first one is Ventures Arcade. Many of you might know about this. We actually, in our adult ed ESL program, we adopted Ventures about 2 years ago. We've been using side by side forever, and we really like it. Our teachers are really loving it. And one of the resources that goes along with Ventures, this is a free resource for anyone actually, online, is Ventures Arcade. And so you can see here that there are 5 different levels of English, from basic, level 1, level 2, level 3, and level 4. And there's a whole module on citizenship. And so you can see here, it breaks it down, information from the N400, like personal information, information at school. And then it also has the 100 questions. So they can learn the 100 questions as well as preparing to complete their N400 application. So it's a really good free resource for not only citizenship teachers, but ESL. And then finally, there's a collaboration between Smithsonian Institution and the USCIS, which is a fabulous resource that Jody and I use pretty much on a daily. And in this website, students can either click on a module to learn more information. I do this sometimes in class, and then sometimes I'll assign it out of class. So there's a whole separate section on courts or the 1800s or the 1900s. So they can learn and explore. And then they can also do practice quizzes. So they can do like 10, the multiple choice quizzes from the questions that they ask from the 100 questions. And so they can just do those over and over and over as much as they want. I always tell my students to go to uscis.gov versus anything else out there, because a lot of times I have students telling me, oh, teacher, I watched a YouTube video and this is what they asked at the interview, and it's not always accurate. I've been to several interviews personally, and so I know what they ask pretty much on a, in general. And so I always tell my students, go here. This is the legit source. You don't want to watch stuff on YouTube because you might get incorrect information. So now I'm going to throw it over to Jody, and she's going to talk to you about one of her lessons.
Thank you, Jill. Hello, everyone. My name is Jody Williams, and again, I am the lead adult education instructor for BPSOS, Center for Community Advancement. We are a nonprofit organization who largely serves the Vietnamese community in Westminster, California, located in Orange County. And our mission is to empower, organize, and equip Vietnamese individuals and communities in their pursuit of liberty and dignity. The programs that we offer include USCIS citizenship classes, CDE citizenship, which is California Department of Education classes, and ESL classes from beginning literacy to advanced. We don't just offer ESL and citizenship, however. We are a wraparound type of service, a nonprofit organization that also includes health awareness and prevention programs, teen mental health resources, developmental disability services for families and their children, OSHA safety training, outreach and education for civic and community engagement. So I really like to emphasize the fact that in our nonprofit organization, we really provide wraparound services for the Vietnamese community so that they can become engaged and active and motivated members in their community, not only in order to advocate for themselves and their families, but also to feel empowered and as lawful permanent residents, be aware of the rights that they already have and the rights that they will additionally receive once they become US citizens. So I really like to talk about how, as a nonprofit, we offer a lot of different resources so that our community members feel, engaged and they feel like they can advocate and speak up for themselves, because I don't know if too many people are aware, but in the Vietnamese culture, it is very, they're very apprehensive and they're very humble and very kind, and they're a little shy to speak up for themselves and their rights. So at BPSOS, we try really to prepare them to become empowered individuals in their society so that they can empower their families, and it can trickle down that way. A lot of our students are older adults, and so they have a lot of these programs prepare them not only to be engaged members in their classrooms, but also in their community. And we also offer services for their children, which is a really big help to them, because a lot of them feel a little apprehensive when asking for help with children who might have any developmental disabilities. So we really try to provide a kind of all-around service package for them so that they feel like they can become active and engaging members in their communities now and when they become citizens. I chose to teach the Civics Education First Amendment Rights Lesson Plan. The central skills emphasized and taught include obviously all the ones that Christy mentioned: communication, critical thinking, interpersonal skills, problem solving, and processing and analyzing information. The reason why I chose these is because I want my students to feel comfortable and confident in their ability to critically think about the things that they are doing, not only now as lawful permanent residents, but once they become citizens. I always ask my students, why do you want to learn English? Why do you want to become a US citizen? And the first thing they say is, I want to vote. okay, but what does that mean? Why do you want to vote? What is that going to do for you and your community and your family? So in that way, they have to communicate with each other and critically think about why they want to be US citizens, why they risk their lives to come here, and what it means for them and their families back in Vietnam when they try to sponsor them to come here as well. The interpersonal skills, obviously problem solving, these things are really important for my students, not only because they are living here now, but once they become US citizens, they will still continue to live here and try to become active and engaging members in their community. So they're going to need to problem solve not only for their rights as US citizens, but also for their rights as a human being. You know, they're going to need to be able to differentiate between different resources that the United States offers in terms of housing, fair housing, and also medical benefits, you know, so housing benefits, medical benefits, and you know, advocating for themselves and their children. These skills were emphasized due to their relevancy embedded in the contextualized lesson plan. I was able to use the TSTM lesson plan and coordinate it with my own lesson plan, because again, as Jill mentioned, you know, they are learning for their citizenship exam, and sometimes they do get kind of tunnel vision in that. But I always like to emphasize to my students that you are still going to be speaking English when you leave, and when you become a US citizen, you will still be breathing, you will still be living here. And so it is important for you to be able to speak English in a contextualized environment, going to the doctor, helping your children with their homework and that sort of thing. You're not just going to walk around and talk to everyone about, you know, the Constitution written in 1787 and George Washington being the first president. You're going to need to learn English to advocate for yourself and really engage in your community. The successful use of these skills was measured by the students' ability to support each other during the guided activity provided, which included necessary vocabulary. And I always like to tell my students about the objectives. So what are your goals? Not only the goals for the lesson, but also for themselves. You know, what does it mean, a goal? What does a goal mean? I always like to provide extra wording and vocabulary for them so that they can use these. They can be universal in that sense. They can use these vocabulary terms and, you know, the idea of protesting as a First Amendment right inside and outside of the classroom. The lesson objectives included were to define protest and explain its connection to the First Amendment and the Civil Rights Movement, to place the Civil Rights Movement in a contextualized setting by learning how Martin Luther King Jr.'s activism spurred a change in the United States history and an advancement towards equity and justice, and to analyze how protests can lead to change using an example from US history. I also contextualize this with my Vietnamese students by comparing and contrasting their idea of protesting in their country, which unfortunately is actually non-existent in their country. Currently, they're not allowed to protest. And so they didn't really consider this as important as, you know, as they did by the end of the lesson. Once they knew, you know, okay, I know First Amendment right includes freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of assembly, but what does it mean to be able to freely protest and advocate for your rights? Next, please. Thank you. The lesson adaptations and best practices used included relating the topic to course content, which is my citizenship class that I already teach. And I started by creating a discussion questions related to the unit the students are studying and the TSTM lesson. So again, I laid out some vocabulary terms and I created three columns. The first one was the vocabulary word. The second one was what they thought it meant, my students. And then the third column was, you give me an example of that. You know, what does it mean to you and why? I always like to ask my students why, and that includes the one of the 9 central skills, which is critical thinking. I like to include, I always ask them why. And actually my favorite word in Vietnamese, I've only learned about 6, but my favorite word right now is tại sao, which means why. So okay, George Washington was the first president. We celebrate President's Day in February, but why? Why do we celebrate those presidents? Why do we celebrate Memorial Day? So I really want them to contextualize it and be able to explain it to their classmates and to anyone outside of the classroom who would be willing to listen. And that really gauges their learning and how much they've learned and how they can disseminate it in their own words. I also explained and modeled vocabulary, including the main theme of protest. I also included a short question and answer section to confirm comprehension. I included a student reflection and discussion of goals and learning objectives met. The best practice that I used was number one, considering learners' personal circumstances. And again, this included me asking them to compare and contrast their idea of protest in their country, Vietnam, to our country in the United States. And at first, I did get a little pushback, why, what does this have to do with what we're learning? And that to me, I have to reiterate the fact that after you become U.S. citizens, there are other things that you have in your toolkit, in addition to the teaching skills that matter toolkit. My students and instructors in general have their own toolkit. What can we use? What can we pull from our background and cultural competent knowledge that we can use in outside of the classroom to make sure that we are advocating for our rights and what it means to be a U.S. citizen? I could ask 10 people on the street, American citizens, a question about history and government, and I don't know how many would be able to quite answer that. I know I couldn't before I began teaching this. So I really want my students to be able to advocate for their rights. Not only the First Amendment rights, but all the rest of the 9 that come along with the Bill of Rights. Best practice number 2, supporting language development. I definitely wanted them to be able to use the vocabulary from the TSTM toolkit lesson plan and the vocabulary from our textbook and kind of integrate it together to create a kind of cohesive, coherent dialogue between themselves and, outside of the classroom as well. Because if they can explain what everything means to them in their own way, then it'll be much easier for them once they go out after class to explain it to other people and make sense of it. The next slide, please. Okay, and a lesson reflection. What I always like to do at the end of my lesson is circle back. So I like to include the lesson objectives at the beginning and then ask them, okay, did you learn this? So I like to conclude the lesson with, can you please tell me 3 things that you've learned today? How will you use this outside of the classroom? And then what was your main takeaway from this lesson? So I like to do kind of a circular lesson in that way. So could they, as a result of this lesson, explain the First Amendment and why protesting is a right protected by this amendment? Could they give examples of different forms of protest and describe when each may be most productive? And could they compare and contrast effectively different different forms of protest and describe, in their home country, Vietnam, and in the United States, as well as the extent to which protesting is allowed in both their home country and the United States? And most importantly, could they advocate for their First Amendment rights as U.S. citizens? And I think as a result of this lesson, using the TSTM toolkit, the critical thinking skills, all of the, the 9 central skills and the best practices, I really do believe that they're able to do that. And then what I actually wanted to mention really quickly in our nonprofit organization, BPSOS, we also include guest speakers. I know Christy and Jill mentioned that different resources that you can bring into the classroom as part of the central skills and the best practices will really demonstrate and be effective for our students in terms of, how they view the United States and what actual resources there are apart from us as instructors. I know as instructors, and all of you, I'm sure, have had this experience, we're not only instructors, we're not only administrators. We are guidance counselors. We are, international ambassadors. When we represent the United States and what that means to our students. And I think that the most important thing that we can provide for our students is not only our knowledge and our willingness to teach and let them have this platform for their voice, but also to bring in additional resources that will help them see that we're not the only resource and there's so much more that they can use. So we have guest speakers come in. Actually, we have speakers that speak about Medicaid and Medi-Cal for our students. We have speakers that come in and talk about Orange County fair housing laws and practices, especially with the whole COVID-19 situation. We want to bring in relevant and current resources that our students can use to make sure that they're getting the most benefit that they can get while we're in this kind of tough situation. And thirdly, we offer a presentation by OC voter registration. So we have the Orange County voter registrar speakers come in and talk about the important the importance of voting. Who, what, when, where, why? What does your vote mean? Does it really count? Where does it go? And the process of that. I know there was one of the best practices, or one of the critical, 9 central skills that taught our students that when you have that mapping, when you have that step-by-step process of the voting, for example, it really gives the students that kinesthetic, that tangible thing that they can see. Okay, if I do this, then it means this. There's actual results from that, and there's a whole process that they can follow and really feel a member of their community. And then the last thing I wanted to mention was that as an organization, we do offer a naturalization workshop, which literally goes through the process of what it means to become a US citizen, how to do that, and why it is important, and the benefits that you receive once you do become a US citizen. And next slide, please. Okay, and then as Jill mentioned before, USCIS is such an amazing resource, not only for the Smithsonian resources, which include N400 and Civics, History and Government practice, but also USCIS is a one-stop shop. As Jill mentioned also, this is the one-stop. If the students need any information current, up to date about fees, N400 application process, practicing, learning about citizenship, applying for citizenship, they even have videos and practice quizzes. So it really is a whole package ready for them to take advantage of, and it's free. And then it also has resources that they can use for anything else they need. And then USA Learns. I use this every single day in my classroom. I absolutely love this website. I love it. I use it every single day. What I like about it is that it has citizenship and English. Okay, so you can obviously practice for your citizenship exam completely, N400 and History and Government, but also the English. And it even has advanced English. So it has first English course, second, third, and then it even has specific topics that they can learn about, which really contextualizes it for them in their real life, everyday situations, right? Going to the doctor, family, school, numbers. So I really like the progression of their English courses as well. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Jill and Jody. Oh my gosh, you really made these lessons come to life off the paper, because I've seen the toolkit, but wow, how you use them and scale them out with your students is wonderful. So we'd like to ask you, as you were listening, did something pop into your mind? Maybe a new topic, maybe a new activity? Was there something new that maybe you're going to consider teaching in the realm of civics education? I loved what Jane wrote in the chat. Now that we've become accustomed to, doing this remote instruction, gosh, I think it'll be so much easier in the future for us to invite guests into our classrooms, maybe virtually, maybe you want to invite someone who's even out of the state to come and speak. We'll be able to do that now that we know how to do it. So go ahead and share in the chat. What are some thoughts that come to your mind as far as anything you heard today? I'm pretty sure you'll agree that it seems like civics education has taken on a new importance. It's always been important, but now more than ever. Guest speakers, Amelia, importance of voting, self-advocacy, asking why it's important to them. Not all of our students, but we certainly have students who are from marginalized populations. And I don't know if you've ever experienced seeing a quiet student suddenly step up and speak in your class. If we can get them to do that outside of the class, that is a wonderful thing. Thank you so much, Regina. Thank you, Lolita. Let's see what else we have here. Community applications. I think, honestly, by teaching more civics education, civics topics, I'm going to learn more about my own community as well. Sometimes I learn from students, honestly. Reflect on the skills presented because it's similar how you present your course. That's excellent. You can see some, oftentimes we call these soft skills, but some of these skills are just so important. And what's beautiful with this toolkit, they're embedded right in the lesson plans. So you don't have to do too much yourself. It shows you what part of the lesson plan that students are going to navigate systems or practice communication. I'm excited to explore USA Learns. Videos, real people. That can be very convincing and motivating. Yes, thank you. Yeah, it's true. Lynn, navigating systems and processing and analyzing information. It's hard to even imagine all the different systems we navigate on a day-to-day basis. You know, everything from, you know, looking up my kids' grades on a portal, you know, from the school district, to making a doctor's appointment and getting through, you know, press 1 for this. So many different things that we have to navigate. Okay, thank you, everybody. Okay, so thank you so much, Iwa. Good to see you. Thank you for coming. So thank you. I hope you enjoyed the information here. Before we wrap up, are there any questions that you have, either for Jody or Jill, or civics education in general, or about TSTM? Okay. All right, thank you, everybody. So Jill did mention this, and I believe that the chat, it will be shared in the chat again. There it is. Okay, it's right in the chat, the link. I recommend you click on that before we exit. We have coming up the second summer that we would be offering this, the Teaching the Skills That Matter virtual conference. It's 2 days. You're going to learn not just about civics education, but about this whole initiative. So there are 4 other topic areas besides civics education. You'll hear again about these central skills, these 9 skills, and there are 3 approaches. One of which you heard about as I was going through some of the different skills, project-based. So it's a great conference to, you know, if you're going to be available sometime June 15th and 16th. It's completely online, and you can register on the Links website, or you see, again, the link in the chat. I really recommend that you attend that. Again, as Jill and Jody alluded to, I didn't mention as much, but this is from OCTE, so the Department of Education Office of Career and Technical Education for Adults. They're rolling this out, and it's going to be coming. So Jill and Jody were 2 California teachers who were coached on, you know, these lessons and these approaches. So you'll be hearing a lot more about TSTM in the next couple of years. So you might as well be innovative and in front of the line, and go ahead and register for this virtual conference so you can know what's going to be happening. Thank you so much for attending with us today. I'm sure if you're like the rest of us, we're suffering from Zoom fatigue, but obviously your professional development is important for you. So thank you for coming. We really appreciate it. And congratulations, we made it through another crazy school year. So keep persisting, teachers. We're almost there. These are some resources that were mentioned and referenced in today's presentation. And there will be a final evaluation that will open. Thank you so much for attending, everybody. Have a great rest of your school year. Bye now.
Thank you so much, Christy, Jody, Jill. We appreciate it very much. And as Christy mentioned, the evaluation link is in the chat. If you would be so kind, just click on that. We would very much appreciate if you could complete that. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great rest of your day and rest of your week. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.